Yesterday, Kobold Press kinda shadow dropped the first playtest of Project Black Flag upon us, and I have to say there are a few things that I find really interesting. Hi there fellow roleplayers and game masters, my name is Mr. Tarask and this is your go-to YouTube channel for everything Project Black Flag by Kobold Press. And yesterday for me on Monday they shadow dropped playtest packet number 1. Half of the world was probably expecting it on a Friday, a Black Flag Friday, which they were calling it, but suddenly something popped up in my mailbox on a Monday and I'm really excited about this. So I've been reading through this yesterday evening and this morning and I really like what I'm seeing. And the first thing I've noticed is they completely ditched the word race, which is, to my opinion, and I'm gonna keep this very short, to my opinion, a really good idea. And I know there's a lot of people on my channel in my comment section that kind of want to have a discussion about that. This is not the place to do that. I think it's a good idea and it is what they're going with. So if you're not okay with it, deal with it or don't deal with it, right? So this playtesting material is interesting because they're doing something different. Well, not totally different from other RPGs, but different from 5th edition as we know it right now. Instead of having a race, they are having a lineage and a heritage. Lineage kind of decides your biological line where you come from, so it kind of determines more like your speed and your age and those kinds of things. And then there is your heritage, which more says where you were raised or how you were raised or by whom you were raised or whatever, which gives you some other abilities. And although there are a bunch of heritages tied to a certain lineage, for example the dwarf, you can also pick them even if you belong to another, I'm gonna say race, but it is basically it's the lineage. But if you choose to be human, you can also choose to be raised by dwarfs and have stuff from them. So it's really cool. Really simple system, easy to understand, and just completely backwards compatible with 5th edition. So the first part they're going into, I'm not gonna really cover, because what it does is it just explains what this is. There's just a few things that they say that are important to know is player characters created using this, which they are calling right now Core Fantasy System, which is probably a placeholder name, are slightly more powerful than characters created using 5th edition. But they are close enough so that a 5e fighter, for example, could still play with another 5e a fighter from Project Black Flag. This is intentional. You could do a few things. There's also saying you can give your 5e fighter that's sitting next to a Project Black Flag fighter, you can give them an extra feat at level 1. But other than that, you can also give them another heritage option or stuff like that. So we don't get classes yet. They're saying it's coming in playtest package 2. So I'm not gonna build a character using this system yet because I want to have classes first, and then I'm gonna probably do a character build video. So what they do is they talk about what an RPG is, what the dice represent, who the game master is, who the player characters are, tools you need, what you get from this book, which is not a book yet, it's just 12 pages of a flat out PDF. But then they go into character creation, and although they go into like what everything means, hit points and level and all that stuff, I don't really want to talk about that right now because most people interested in this stuff know what an RPG is. They've been playing 5th edition or other gaming systems, Pathfinder, whatever, so they probably know what a proficiency bonus is. But what I think is really interesting is they go off of the class first and then they go into lineage and heritage. So the class more represents of who you are and what you do. For example, if you want to be a sneaky rogue, you can be a human sneaky rogue, you can be a dwarven sneaky rogue, you can be an elven sneaky rogue, whatever it is. That the fact that you are a sneaky rogue kind of determines that you are a sneaky rogue, right? It's not because you are an elf that you need to be a sneaky rogue or an archer. It is basically, no, you are an archer and you just happen to be a human, right? So then they go into like choose a lineage and heritage, and this is really cool. It's a final checklist and I really like this. This is really simple to add in a book, but it's kind of like a checklist that you just mark, right? And if you have everything that this checklist says on your character sheet, you have a full character. You have everything you need to start playing. And that is really cool for newer players, but also for like old school players like myself. I really like a checklist like this. I'm like, okay, do I have my skill proficiencies? Do I have my proficiency bonus, my starting equipment? Do I have my hit points total? My spell save DCs? What are my size? What's my senses? And then there's something they say in point number 5, which is right here. Your luck points are set to 0. They don't talk about luck points in this module ever again, so it's probably coming in another module. Gaining levels, yada yada yada. And then they go into the races, which are now the lineage and the heritage. So the lineage is your more biological line you come from. That's why the word is lineage, right? So you, your age, your size, your speed, and some stuff like dark vision and maybe some other minor stuff as well. And then you go into your heritage, which is more where you come from, who you've been raised by. Like, for example, you were a dwarf who lost their way and joined a caravan of humans. You have your biological stuff from being a dwarf, but you also have your nomadic skills from being with a caravan of humans, right? So they go into 3 races. I'm just gonna say races. I don't know why, but it's just still something that I automatically do. But I'm getting there. I'm trying to say lineage. So they have 3 lineages. Which is the dwarf, the elf, and the human. Now the dwarf and the elf feel really, they kind of feel the same as in 5th edition, but just in another way of approaching it, but they really feel safe, and they are dwarves and they are elves. And then there's the human who really has some cool stuff going on. So the dwarf lineage, let's just get in here, right? Age, size, we all know that. Their base walking speed is 25 feet. They have night vision, not dark vision, so they changed that up to night vision, which is good, right? They still have the dwarven resilience, which is resistance against poison and advantage against saves against becoming poisoned. And then they have dwarven toughness. So if you are a dwarf biologically, you have both resilience and toughness gives you that extra hit point per level. Then they go into 2 heritages, the Fireforge heritage and the Stone heritage, which I think is really cool. This is some really cool situational stuff going on. The Fireforge characters who choose the heritage were raised with the values and traditions of the Fireforge dwarven clans. So they are the smiths that live in the mountains, that build stuff and go and search for the hottest of fires and everything, to kind of build new items and magic items. And even though it is a dwarven heritage and 99.9% of people who have this heritage are probably going to be dwarves, you could also be an elven child who was found by a dwarf, brought to the mountain and raised inside the mountain in the Fireforged ways. So that's possible. So you pick the dwarf and then you pick an heritage from any other lineage, right? That is the system. It's easy enough. Expert Artisan. You gain proficiency with glass blower's tools or smith's tools. Choose one of those tools. Your proficiency bonus doubled for any ability check. You have resistant to fire damage. And I like this because if you are a full-out dwarf with the Fireforged dwarf thing, you are like the stereotypical dwarf. You both have resistance to poison and to fire damage starting at level 1, which I really love, as kind of like more people who want to power build and are also choosing their talents to be resistant to certain types of damage. Maybe become a barbarian. If they rage, they are resistant. If they rage, they are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage, fire damage, and poison damage, right? So they're really strong. You can speak, read, and write Ignan in addition to chosen languages, and then Reforge. This is really specific, situational, but cool. Your people have a deep connection with elemental fire and have collectively learned how to repair forged items with a touch. You know the mending cantrip, but you can only use it on repairing objects made by metal, such as a sword or whatever, or an axe or whatever. So you can use mending as a cantrip, but only on metal objects, which I think is really situational, but also really cool, right? And then you have the stone Heritage, which has stuff like, we know, for example, they have the weapon training, they have the armor training, so they're more like stone dwarfs, right? Tool proficiency, but they also have, where was it? Eye for quality, which is basically, this kind of replaces stone cunning. Whenever you make an ability check related to the origin of metalwork or masonry, you can add your proficiency bonus to the roll. You have proficiency in a relevant skill or tool, you add double your proficiency bonus. So this is kind of like stone cunning, but for stone, work, and metal, basically. Which I think is really cool because it makes sense. Because stone cunning, I've always found as a player, I've always found stone cunning such a cool ability. You rarely use it, but every now and then you become in a dungeon, place your hand on the wall, and you're like trying to feel who built this, and your dungeon master gives you this really cool bit of information about goblins built this probably 200 years ago, which is really cool to have, but it also really makes sense that dwarves can do this with metal, since they are often metal workers. Then they go into the elf, which is the same thing. Age, size, speed, night vision. Then they have keen senses, so they are proficient in the perception skill. They have advantage on saves against being charmed, and magic cannot put them to sleep, so don't try to cast sleep on them. Trance, so they don't have to sleep, the same thing we know and love from the elves. They have the cloud heritage and the grove heritage. The cloud heritage is a touch of magic. This is really cool. Choose a school of magic for which you have cultivated an affinity. You learn a cantrip of your choice from that school. And then at 3rd level, you pick a spell. You can pick another spell at, 5th level and so on, something like that. So, and the coolest part about this is you can basically choose your charisma, intelligence, or wisdom modifier as your spellcasting ability. And that opens up so many portals towards playing a character you absolutely want to play, right? So let's say you're playing an elf. You play an elf, but you also you play an elven fighter, sword and board fighter elf, right? Well, I'm a fighter, I go sword and board, and you really want to go that martial route. But let's say you're a purple dragon knight, a revised purple dragon knight, but you're a purple dragon knight. You happen to have charisma for being a purple dragon knight. So if you become a cloud heritage elf, you have that charisma, and you can now choose to, I don't know, cast divination spells. Which is really cool, which gives you, divination spells are often out of combat spells, so you become this fighter inside of combat, but outside of combat you can do like, I don't know, identify or stuff like that, just a little bit of extra thing you can do in those role-playing encounters, or when you're figuring out a puzzle or whatever, you can cast this one thing, or you can cast like, you can pick a cantrip that you just love, that just I don't know, is magic missile a cantrip or is it a spell? I don't really know. Anyway, grove heritage traits, beast affinity. Using gestures and sounds, you can communicate with simple IDs with beasts. You have advantage on checks made to interact with non-hostile beasts. You have a climbing speed equal to your walking speed. You have weapon training in longsword, short sword, short bow, and longbow. And you get a few languages. So the elves and the dwarves feel like elves and dwarves. Then there is the human. Human, age, rarely live up to more than 100 years old. Okay, I think that's really stretching it. I think rarely lives up to C60 is enough in a medieval setting, right? To my opinion. Let's face it, humans, the size, the speed, they are ambitious, which means they gain proficiency in one skill of their choice, and you gain one talent, and talents are basically feats. So the feat system has been changed into talents. This talent can perform any of the talent lists. You must meet the talent prerequisites. And what they did here is, I think, is really cool. So a lot of modules in the past for 5th edition, official and non-official, kind of try to take a human and then give like these sub-races of human and kind of like, without literally saying it, you're African, you're Asian, you're, like Scandinavian, you're European, you're Western, you're whatever, and they're kind of, without saying it literally like that, they're kind of going that route. With this, Kobold Press is totally, absolutely not doing that. They're saying nomadic, or cosmopolitan. So either you come from a nomadic lifestyle, you've been traveling around, you're accustomed to that, or you come from the big city and you are a street rat or whatever, and you have street cred, and you know how to talk to people, you know, all that stuff. So for example, nomadic heritage, alignment, I mean, is that still in there? Fuck alignment, right? I don't care about alignment. Resilience. You have advantage on checks or save made to. Bleh. You have advantage on checks or saves made to resist debilitating weather effects, such as those caused by extreme heat or cold. Additionally, when you complete a short rest, you can reduce your exhaustion level by 1. You can use that once per day. That is, I think, is really cool. That really says nomadic lifestyle. Like, I know how to travel through the mountains. I know how to resist the cold. And even if I get exhausted, all I need is like half an hour of rest just to get like a sandwich or whatever, a ration, and just get my second wind going and just go. That's nomadic heritage. And I really like that. And I think it is really cool that they split that up. And then there is the cosmopolitan heritage, which is the same thing but different. Street smarts. While in city or in other urban environments, you and your group can become lost except for magical means. You can also not be surprised whenever you make a check related to understanding the purpose or significance of a building, right, or object from a culture you are not familiar with. You can add your proficiency bonus to the roll, or double it if you're already proficient. So it's the same thing, but completely different. And I just love it, but it is very situational. And I think that is a good thing. Like the nomadic heritage, I can name games that I've played where it wouldn't make sense to pick that. Because even if we've been traveling far distances, our game master just didn't really go into that kind of stuff. So they didn't really go into like long-term weather effects. They didn't go into like these long strides with like exhaustion levels and all of that. But some game masters really like that, and they really like to like fuck you up completely before you get to your end destination, which is great. And other games I've played were completely traveling and forests and mountains and dungeons, but we rarely got into a big city. So taking this with that kind of game, so before you pick one of these, know your game master, and more importantly, know your game if you can. So then they go into backgrounds. Backgrounds are same thing, basically, but different. For example, there's the scholar. I've always liked this. Choose the following: Arcana, History, 2 additional languages. I always like to play characters that know, like, at level 1, 6 languages or something like that. Like, and I always like choose Abyssal and Draconic and languages that are really uncommon, just to screw with my game master. To be completely honest, I love that moment where the game master is like, yeah, you see these two guys and they're talking in a language you've heard before, but you don't understand what they're saying. And I'm like, sorry, is it one of these languages perchance? And they're like, oh shit, yeah, it's Abyssal. You can understand everything they're saying. And then he needs to come up with a conversation, and I find that really entertaining. I'm sorry. I'm apologizing to every game master I've ever did that to. So you get a talent. You spend time researching particular academic subjects on institute learning to honor. Choose a talent from the following list: Polygloth, School of Specialization, or Trade Skills. So you get an extra talent, which is basically an extra feat. Soldier, same thing. You gain the equipment. You gain skill proficiencies, animal handling, athletics, medicine, survival. And you gain proficiency with land or water vehicles. And you gain a talent: armor training, combat casting, or combat conditioning. And then there are the talents, and they kind of split them up into a few subjects. Magical talents, there are martial talents, and technical talents for now. There's only a few. We're almost through the complete book, and I really like combat casting. It's really cool. You automatically succeed on a constitution save to maintain your concentration on a spell if the spell DC is lower than your spell casting DC. So, yeah, a lot of times. If you just take a bit of damage, you just automatically keep concentrating. Only if you take high amounts of damage, you need to make this safe and still have a good chance of maintaining your concentration. So maintaining your concentration becomes really easy. When a hostile creature first enters a space within 5 feet of you or provokes an opportunity attack from you, you can use your reaction to cast a cantrip. Again, really cool. Instead of having to hit them with your whatever you have in your hands, which is most of the times is a spellbook, you have to hit them with a spellbook. You can now hit them with a cantrip. You can use your shield or weapon you are holding as a spell casting focus, as normal. You can use the same hand or hands holding this focus to perform somatic spell components. Really important for games where the game master is strict on that kind of stuff, which not all game masters are. Let me see, Mental Fortitude, School of Specialization, where you can basically take a School of Magic, let's say Divination, and whenever you cast a spell, it becomes a +1 to the attack roll, a +1 to the DC, and the gold spent to copy it into your spellbook is halved, and you can select it multiple times, which is really crazy. Let's say you take this 4 times, you can become a divination wizard that casts divination magic at +4 to the attack roll or the DC. So Mind Spike at a +4. Yeah, really cool, right? Martial talents, armor training, all that stuff. Let's see. Oh, hand to hand is really cool. You're basically a kickboxer. You're proficient with unarmed strikes, and you have a 1d6 plus your strength to hit people. If you're small, it's a 1d4 plus your strength. So you can be like a tiny, let's say a gnome or whatever. It's not tiny, it's small. A gnome, kickboxing gnome, which could be really funny character, just like a gnome kickboxing people in the balls. You have advantage on ability checks made to initiate or escape a grapple. Cool stuff, right? There is the, I cannot scroll further down for some reason. On my other screen I can, but here I can't. I could do this, but, oh, there it is. Yep, I could even move this around, right? You've always, trade skills. You have honed the skills necessary to perform a particular job or profession. When you select this talent, decide that the profession is and then gain the following benefits. Gain proficiency with 1 skill and 1 type of tool or vehicle relevant to your chosen profession. Alternatively, gain proficiency with 2 types of tools or vehicles relevant to your chosen profession. Provided you have access to the necessary equipment and customers, you can spend a day plying your trade and expect to be paid 2 gold pieces or paid with goods and services or equal value. You can select this talent multiple times, so you can basically have a job outside of adventuring. So if you have like this downtime thing going on where other characters are doing all kinds of investigating stuff, you could just set up shop as a smith. Maybe you have a donkey that carries all your smith's tools, and you just carry a smith tool shop around and you just place it in the middle of a market space, and you can make $2 per customer, which is really cool. So that was Project Black Flag, and I like it. I like the lineage and heritage kind of stuff. For example, a dwarven child that got lost and found a caravan of humans, nomadic humans. So biologically he is a dwarf, but he has a lot of those powers, those long striding powers from the nomadic lifestyle. And although Gimli always says dwarves are only good for sprinting, they are natural born sprinters, maybe you want to play a dwarf that is a natural born long strider, if that even makes sense. I'm really excited to see, to get my hands on the classes, because once I get the classes, I want to kind of build like a character. I kind of just want to build maybe even a few characters on this channel right here. Until next video, bye bye.